A lot of military spouses don't realize that they can open their own Roth IRA account in their name if they're married filing jointly, and they can use their spouse's income to qualify to contribute. I think there's something powerful about having an account, a retirement account with your name on it. That's a great thing to have buy-in and to have ownership of the financial situation is.
Welcome to the Military Money Manual Podcast, where every episode is all about achieving financial independence in the military faster than before. We believe personal finance shouldn't be boring or intimidating. Building wealth can be simple, and financial freedom is the ultimate financial goal. Now, here's your hosts, Spencer and Jamie.
Colleen, thanks so much for coming back on the show. We're excited to have you back on. Last time we had you on the show, we talked a lot about various personal finance advice for military spouses, military service members. Since then, you've added a couple letters after your name, accredited financial counselor. Is that right?
Yep.
And that's pretty awesome. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
How is that process, and what did you learn from that experience that, if there's a military spouse out there that's interested in becoming an accredited financial counselor, and maybe they're the person in their group of friends everybody turns to for financial advice, are there any resources you can point them towards?
Yeah, the Accredited Financial Counseling Organization, they do offer scholarships for military spouses once a year. So I applied for the scholarship twice, but I never was selected, but I kept on getting the opportunity to work and talk with people with the accreditation. So I had the privilege of learning more about it. And what I appreciated about it was that it wasn't easy. I had to go through some self-paced study modules. I had to go take an accredited exam of over 150 questions. I had to pass with at least a 77% accuracy. And then I had to document over 1,000 hours of financial literacy or practice, working with clients, publishing educational materials. It was more intense than I realized when I got into it. But once I could see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I really enjoyed it. And so with this accreditation, I am following a code of ethics, the fiduciary code of ethics. I just learned more about personal finance, really how to help people with areas like their credit score, and how not just making a budget, but how can you approach student loans. It was well versed, and I'm really proud of it because it wasn't easy.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know there's two other friends of the podcast, Lacey Langford. She's on the Milmo podcast, and then Kate Horrell at katehorrell.com, and they're both AFCs as well. So you've joined a collection of excellent military-connected AFCs there.
There's a really good military personal finance network. And I know after our last podcast, a couple of our listeners reached out. You got a couple new clients, a handful of new clients. And so we're happy to hear when people make connections that understand the military life and what it's like to be either a service member or a spouse or a dependent. So speaking of that, military spouses will be kind of the focus of today's episode. And there's a lot that goes on for a spouse. I've been a military spouse as well, so I can speak from experience a little bit here, although my experience is a little bit different than the average military spouse. What is it like sometimes when you, either for yourself or people you talk to who are primarily a stay-at-home spouse or in a season of being a stay-at-home spouse, when you talk about money, but they don't sometimes feel like they are contributing to the family's finances without a paycheck?
I was a stay-at-home mom from, I'm doing the math right now, it was 2014. Yeah, full-time, I started in the fall of 2013 until when I launched this business in 2019. And it is hard. It is the hardest job I've ever had as a stay-at-home spouse. And it also, there were a lot of periods where I didn't feel like I was contributing to the family because I didn't have a paycheck coming in every 2 weeks or twice a month. And that really did impact, my confidence and my self-worth. Some people are like, it's not about the money, but I also felt guilty about going and getting a haircut at certain points. And so what I've learned and what I was fortunate to do, I crossed paths with other military spouses around the same time. And I started learning from peers within my community that had been military spouses for longer than I had been alive. And the importance of setting goals. you still need to set goals for yourself as a stay-at-home parent. So regardless if your partner is home and for dinner every night or he's away for a 1-year unaccompanied tour, you still need to set some kind of goal for yourself financially as that stay-at-home parent, because you are working hard. You may not be bringing in a paycheck, but you are saving your family thousands of dollars when it comes to the cost of childcare, the cost of cooking, grocery shopping, keeping your house clean, getting the kids to and from appointments. And that is something that I'm happy to see more and more spouses are acknowledging now more than ever.
So childcare is a huge cost for military families. I think anyone with kids or anyone in the military or anyone with kids outside of the military understands that. When we look at something like a term life insurance policy, sometimes there's some debate or some discussion or maybe a lack of understanding of the importance of maybe insuring the stay-at-home spouse or the primary spouse that stays at home. What are your thoughts on that? Is there value in a life insurance protection for a stay-at-home spouse?
There's huge value. And it's challenging to talk about because normally there's a formula where you take your income and you multiply that by a certain number. Well, how do you take 0 and multiply? You multiply anything by 0, you're going to get 0. So the reason why we have term life insurance on myself now, as the kids are getting older, we still need to have somebody there in case, heaven forbid, something happens to me, because it provides me a sense of security. If something were to happen to me, Richard would have access to that term life policy so that he could hire someone to help get the kids to and from school, so that he could hire someone to help with cooking or even tutoring the kids now that they're in elementary school. They still need help. It's just a different type of help. And so the conversation needs to be identifying and acknowledging that stay-at-home spouse's value that they bring to their family. My term life insurance policy is higher than Richard's. I think it's over $500,000 because when we actually looked at the numbers, we were in California last time we looked at it, and the cost of childcare out there was significantly higher than what it is here in South Carolina. But we just kept it because it's pretty reasonable per month. I mean, trying to think off the top of my head. When you look at the term life policies compared to whole life policies, it's significantly cheaper across the board.
Yeah. If you don't mind sharing, so we talked about estimating childcare costs based on your location. What are some other things that you included in the quote financial value of your contributions to the family? And I don't mean to say that in a joking way, because like you said, it is hard to put a dollar amount down on paper, but you got to look at the cost of childcare, the cost of transportation. If you're a non-salaried employee and your kids are sick, then you're not getting paid that day,
Right.
Things like that.
I would also encourage families to look at their specific situation. If you have a child with a disability, you need to consider how much would the additional childcare cost at that point. What about respite care? If that single parent needed a break, what would respite care look like? If your kids are still young enough, you're going to have to hire someone to help prepare food and help do laundry. And really what you could do is you could look online in your area to see what are these services available. At what cost are those services available to hire out in the area that you're in? Like I said, we were at Camp Pendleton when we crunched these numbers, and I found a lot of self-worth after putting those numbers.
It's probably a very healing conversation to have with your spouse too, to say, oh, wow, I really do contribute a significant financial impact to the family, especially for some of those spouses, like we were saying, that might feel sometimes in some seasons or a lot of the time that they don't have a financial impact. When you put a label on it, like $600,000 or maybe more, then that might feel a little bit validating. I can see that.
So we're talking about two things here. We're talking about the value of a military spouse, like the actual contribution of their work. I had a squadron commander once, and he would always ask whenever they would meet a spouse, do you work outside the home or in the home? This was before, working from home was really a thing. And I always thought it was actually pretty well phrased, because it didn't demean anybody who wasn't, working a second job. Just managing a military household is the full-time job in of itself. But Colleen, do you have any goals for stay-at-home military spouses to prioritize, to feel validated, accomplished? Is there any way that you like to help people take ownership of their financial situation so that when at the end of the month or the quarter or the year, whenever they kind of assess okay, how much value did I bring to the family? Are there measurable, smart goals that you like to set for them or they like to set for themselves?
One thing I don't hear enough military spouses talking about, or really military couples talking about, is how the stay-at-home parent, as long as you are married, filing your taxes jointly, and you combined earn under $240,000, you can contribute to the stay-at-home spouse's Roth IRA. And that was one strategy that Richard and I started way back. Gosh, we were still in Okinawa. So this is like 2014, 15. And that has helped me see that account grow over the years, little by little. I mean, right now for 2024, the maximum you can contribute, I believe, is $7,000 per individual. But just knowing that like on the budget line every month, like there's a line and it's for Colleen's Roth IRA, that feels good. That feels good. Like I'm still contributing to my future self. This is the season of life that I'm in. The other thing I would also encourage people to do is everybody's situation is different. But understanding like every 3 months of being a stay-at-home parent, like what are you working towards? Yes, you want healthy, happy children. That's obviously the main goal for all of us that have stay-at-home kids. But every 3 months, like what are you treating yourself for? So are you taking out, so much money every week to go and buy a new purse? Great. If you want to go to a concert with your husband and put money aside every week so that you can buy the concerts and pay for childcare. That's something, having those goals, like what are you working towards? And it doesn't have to be when your spouse is deployed. Being a full-time stay-at-home parent is hard. And I've said it before, but having something that you're working towards also can be reinforcing.
Yeah, I like that. Having goals that the family's money is still going to, that maybe the stay-at-home spouse drives that goal, whether it's a concert, like you said, or a vacation, or even just clothing. When my wife and I were newlyweds and we were pretty broke, we were digging out of about $118,000 of debt. I've talked about that on podcast episodes before. There's one specific story I remember where she felt guilty and asked for permission to buy a t-shirt. I was like, how much is it? She's, $14 or whatever. I was like, yeah, you can buy a t-shirt. Like, we have a clothing budget for a reason. Go spend it. But she felt that because she wasn't bringing in the money, that she didn't have the same amount of say in the budget and the expenses. Now, as we've matured and grown a lot in our relationship, I think we've moved past that. But there are probably a lot of families out there, especially maybe newlyweds or new couples, that don't have that conversation. And you have to get to the point where you acknowledge the teamwork of our financial goals, whether one paycheck's more or 100% of the family's budget or not.
You said it really well there. It takes time and practice of having these conversations and talking to your partner about, this is what I'd like to do. This is what I am contributing. This is what I want to do in the future with our money. And identifying these goals and talking about how they're going to change as the seasons go on.
One of my favorite things to work through with couples or people that I work one-on-one with is when there's a disagreement. So I'm sure you and your husband have had disagreements, and you can either make up a hypothetical one or talk about one you've worked through a client with. But there's one recently where the couple disagreed on how much they should have in their emergency fund. And one spouse was adamant, we only need 3 months. And the other spouse was adamant, we need 6 months. And I'm like, look, what's it worth to you for your spouse to feel like more secure? Is it worth X amount? It was like, I don't know, $9,000 difference or whatever. And they're like, yeah, that's not that big of a deal. So sometimes one spouse is going to feel really strongly about a goal and the other one might not. And you just have to work together. That will probably resonate with a lot of people. Any stories or anything that comes to mind for you?
I had one client that I worked with, that the husband, and he was like, all right, I've got $50,000 in this mutual fund. This is it was a mutual fund or a money market. Anyway, he had access to it. They both did. And she just wanted to pay off the credit card of $9,000. And he was like, but we have that. I'm like, what? So then we talked through. I'm like, how did you get to that $50,000 number? Like, how is this calculated? And when we really looked down and saw, like, what did they need in an emergency fund for up to 6 months? And he realized, he had way more than he needed to in that account. So then, we can pay off this credit card. So that was one of those like win-wins, but actually having the conversation together, the three of us, it's a perspective. And sometimes, even last week, Richard and I were going through the budget and we realized that we hadn't maxed out my Roth IRA for last year, for 2023. It was a mistake we both missed. I work with numbers for a living. He's, it happens. But then it's like, okay, so what do we do? Luckily, we caught it when we did, so we could go back and contribute to the Roth IRA for 2023 before the April 15th tax deadline. So, mistakes happen. I think that's the other thing that you have to acknowledge. You can go back and fix a lot of mistakes. It may not be as quickly as we were able to address that one, but yeah, if they happen, acknowledge them, learn from it, and move on.
And work together. Yeah, I like it.
So Colleen, you get to work with clients in a coaching practice. And is there a common financial mistake that military families make that you see kind of across the board? Or is there something that you just wish, like, hey, if everybody just did this one thing, you'd save us, a month of time in our coaching practice and we can move on to like the fun things, right? Because I'm sure like when people come in, there's something that you're like, okay, we got to address that before we move on to saving for vacation and saving for, the big trip that you want to take to Disney World.
It's usually one extreme or the other when it comes to the savings account. So they either have the $50,000 in a savings account or they have nothing in the savings account. So it's kind of like, okay, what is your emergency fund that you want to have? So having that conversation, what does this look like? The other thing that it would save a lot of time if you want to use an app to track your finances, if you want to use something like a YNAB where they're going to connect it, you pay the yearly subscription where they're going to connect your accounts, it's worth the money. It's okay. You can pay that money. But I've had a lot of people that are like, I'm just going to do it myself. And after a month of working with me once a week, it's like, you still haven't updated this budget. So like, what's going on here? Or do we just need to automate it? It's okay to automate this stuff. In 2024, there are so many options. You can.
Yeah. Speaking of apps, so I know Jamie's a big fan of YNAB. You're still updating that, Jamie? Is that right?
Yep.
I was a Mint user where I just wanted to track everything in Mint. They've now moved on, RIP. They've now moved on to, I think, Credit Karma, which I haven't used. I was upset with the whole situation of how they went about it. I'm actually paying for Monarch Money now. It's an app on Apple, Android, desktop. And my number one complaint was that they didn't have like a simple reports generation where, on Mint, you could say like, okay, show me my categories for year to date or for the last year or the last 6 months, whatever it was. And they didn't have that feature. It was just like a transaction feature or like they had some weird like Sansky charts. And just the other month, they added the reports feature. So now I'm happy to promote it to everyone. Monarch Money is the app I'm using now. But I know YNAB is another excellent one. Jeremy Schneider from Personal Finance Club uses that. Our very own Jamie uses YNAB as well. There's EveryDollar. There's, I think Rocket Money is another one. But there's just so many apps out there. And I mean, YNAB is still like, under $100 a year. So if you're serious about this, like spend the $100. And like Jamie always says, like if you don't save more, if your net worth doesn't increase by at least $100 in the next year, like I'll just send you $100 to pay for it, because it's just one of those things that like what gets measured matters.
Right.
And when you start measuring your money, it matters to you and you cannot help but start to grow your net worth because you're like, oh, like number gets bigger, happiness increases, hooray. So that's a great advice. I would say if you're like, a financial coach can be absolutely right for the right couple or the right person. But if you come in and you've like, hey, I've been using YNAB for 3 months and the coach has somewhere to start, I think that's fantastic, right? Like that's going to save a lot of time right there.
Yeah, I could talk about that forever. It's so easy now. Google Sheets right on your phone, like right there. But if you're not going to update it, just pay for it.
Yeah, I think there's something for investing financially. We've talked before about, buying the weight set, the home gym, the Peloton bike or whatever. For some people, not for everyone, but for some people like me, when I spend the money, I'm now more motivated to use it. And some of the apps have a learning curve, like all of that. There's things out there, whether it's a spreadsheet or an app. But when you make a little bit of an investment, whether it's money or time to learn the system, you're more committed to it and more likely to succeed.
Very much that mentality, like you sign up for the 5K. People are like, why do you pay for the 5K? You could just run around your neighborhood. Because I signed up for it, therefore I have to show up for the 5K.
Yes. Do you find that people that do a spreadsheet are just as suitable as YNAB or an app if they're committed to doing it? Both can be good and positive, or they just need to pick something and commit to it?
It really just pick something that works for you and use it. So, Richard and I, we were using Excel sheets because we started budgeting before we had smartphones, and then have just transitioned into Google Sheets, but because that works for us. Every year, like we check in and I'm like, are you sure we still want to use this? I mean, like we have the money to go buy one of these apps. Like wouldn't it save some time right now? But it still works for us. And do your research, ask around, but it's okay to pay for this and still work with a financial counselor at the end, because ultimately what the financial counselor is that accountability. You're checking it. it's one thing to put it on the app or the spreadsheet and be like, okay, whatever. But when you actually have to sit down and talk to someone about what was going on with that purchase, you can kind of dive into the whole behavior behind the purchases. What caused the purchases? What's going on here? And you can have the conversation. You can't have the conversation with an app.
One of the aspects of coaching I love the most is the outside perspective, the unemotional, unbiased third party of trying to, why is eating out important to you, partner A, and it's not to partner B? Like, what is it, whether from your childhood or from your family of origin, or, Spencer's going to be talking more and more about money stories and financial psychology and those things over the next couple months. But like, why do you value, like my family, every Sunday after church, we went out to eat. That was like the one time we did. So that was a tradition that was important to me when we first got married. My wife's family did not. So she's like, why is this so important to you? It's stressful. Like, kids are hungry by the time we get there, we're waiting for food. And I was like, I don't know. We just do it. And so sometimes having that outside perspective to ask questions and pull some of those values and the reasoning behind it is a really helpful way to employ either a coach or a counselor with your finances.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing that we're doing this year is a no spend March, which has a lot of asterisks on it.
Kind of like your no international travel 2024.
Exactly. Yes.
Tell me more about this news with March.
But well, I mean, you could pick any month you want. In fact, February is probably the best month for it because it's the shortest month. But there's a lot of things are exempt. Like, we're still going to be buying groceries. We're still going to be buying toiletries, right? We're still going to be, buying supplies for the house. But one of the things that it's forcing me to do is every time I'm like, man, I need a desk lamp, right? Like, this room is dark right now and I need a desk lamp. And I go and I search for it and I'm like, cool, I want that one. And it's just forcing me to think, do I need this right now? No. Like, I can open up a window and during the day or make do somehow at night. And it's just forcing me to say, like, do I need this right now? No, I'll buy it in April. That might be a position of privilege, right? Where like I pretty much have everything I already need, right? Like I have a laptop to record this podcast. I have a phone, but it is a forcing function where it's just, I'm saying like, look, unless it's like something I eat or something, I'm not buying any clothes this month. I think that having just something like that to kind of like disrupt your thought process, right? Or to force you to question your beliefs, like Jamie was saying, that can work for some people where you have a month where you say like, look, I'm only going to be buying, food, water, and shelter this month. Like Jamie was saying, like you can have a coach, you can have a counselor that like asks you these questions, but you can do it yourself too, especially if you're married or you have a partner. It can be tough conversations, but you can also question each other gently with love, but you can have those conversations. And I think a military spouse can be perfectly positioned to be kind of the financial focal point of the family. And, and a lot of times when you are living OCONUS, you cannot work. There are SOFA agreements, status of forces agreements that say like, you cannot work in this country. And that's not to say that maybe you can't negotiate some kind of, work from home situation or working for an American company while you're overseas. But usually the SOFA agreements prevent any kind of like working on the economy. And that can be extremely frustrating for a military spouse that wants to contribute financially to the family. And I'm getting to my point here in a roundabout way, but the point was, Jamie and I talked about this I think it was an episode like the 3 habits of highly successful marriages. And one of them was at any point in time, there is someone who is the manager of the family finances, regardless of which partner is managing the money. And it can switch too. That was something that we talked about, was that it doesn't necessarily have to be the spouse, the stay-at-home spouse. It could be the other spouse, but maybe they're deployed, maybe they're busy. And so I think there's an opportunity there for the military spouse to not only contribute their labor, but also their mind to the operation of the family finances.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this on the last time I was on the show. The stay-at-home spouses are the ones that have the most hands-on with the family's budget. We're usually the ones that are grocery shopping. We're usually the ones doing all the shopping, clothes shopping, whatever we need to do. So the stay-at-home spouses, we have the opportunity to make some of the biggest impacts on our family's financial future. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations. There's more and more people talking about loud budgeting right now on social media, and I love it. I have done this with my friends for years, and I can't afford it. And I mean, that's just probably my personality to begin with. But now I'm seeing more and more people are like, but maybe she could do something different with us. Or we're talking about finances more, not only as a military community, but I think as a nation. After all the student loan issues happened over last summer, we're talking about mortgage rates now more than ever. And I don't know if that's just because of like the season of life that I'm in, but I think in general, more and more people are having these conversations out in the open than ever before. I mean, what do you see?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think there's a lot more conversation at work. The military and the DoD are trying to get resources out there and get better websites and better training and things like that. We still have a long way to go, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely more socially acceptable to talk about whether it's budgeting or taking advantage of a military annual fee waiver on a credit card and things like that excite me too.
Just a quick note from one of our sponsors, and then we'll be right back to the show.
It's no secret Spencer and I are both huge fans of the Thrift Saving Plan, the military's version of the 401k retirement plan. We've both been investing in the TSP for over 14 years and are thrilled to announce we've consolidated all the information you need to know into a new course called the Confident TSP Investing Course.
That's right. The course is a comprehensive guide to navigating the TSP, breaking it down to easy, bite-sized chunks that lay out the basics of the thrift savings plan, the funds available, and the investing strategies so you can build wealth while you serve.
We both know what it's like to be a beginner and to be overwhelmed with all the information that's out there about investing in the TSP. Head over to militarymoneymanual.com/TSP, Tango Sierra Papa, to find our simple breakdown of all you need to know. You get lifetime access, and we'll have a growing library of content. And one of my favorite parts about the course is that for every course we sell, we're going to be donating one to an E4 or below.
Yeah, I love that feature of the course, Jamie. So if you're an officer, an NCO, a senior NCO out there, and you purchase a course, first of all, thank you. And also know that you're helping a fellow service member, a sailor, a soldier, a Marine, an airman, a guardian, a Coast Guardsman, E4 or below, take one step closer to their financial success.
The link's in the show notes, or head over to militarymoneymanual.com/TSP, where you can sign up for the Confident TSP Investing course. Now, back to the show. So, Colleen, I want to do a little mini coaching exercise real quick in our last couple minutes here. So let's say you're talking about goals a few minutes ago. Spencer mentioned no spend March. Let's say I want to do no spend May, but my spouse isn't interested in it, or I want to start maxing out my Roth IRA after hearing this conversation for the first time ever. We've never talked about IRAs before, and my spouse isn't quite convinced. What are some ways or some questions that you might be able to help my spouse and I work through that as a hypothetical situation?
Yeah, hypothetical situation. What is your why? Why do you want to do a no spend May? Why do you want to max out the Roth IRA? Identifying your why and reflecting on what is motivating you to do this, because it may not be fun. I mean, it may not be fun to do a no spend May, but why are you doing this? Is this to reduce debt? Is it to increase your savings account? Is it to get ready for potential PCS this summer? And so you're decluttering the house, trying to get ready, prepared for that. That's going to help you motivate or stay motivated throughout that challenge. My why for my Roth IRA has always been, it was something I brought into the marriage. I was teaching for 4 years before we got married just south of Detroit. And not only did I have a 403B that I rolled over, but I've always had that Roth IRA. So that was something I was able to bring with me and continue to grow in married life. And it's something I'm really proud of that. I've seen it. We've gone through a lot together. We went through 2007 together. We started in 2007. And so seeing that go up and down, that has also helped me become more prepared for financial ups and downs. So when 2020 hit, March of 2020 hit, and everything was going down, and my husband's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? I'm like, it's a clearance sale. This is awesome. I mean, COVID was horrible. That was horrible. From a financial perspective, we were in the situation where we could, and we did. We went and bought stocks when it was so low. And so we were able to kind of go through the ups and downs of the financial markets together. And it's helped us come together and learn how to talk about finances, which has then helped us be able to set different goals. I'm going on a cruise next week. By the time this episode comes out, I will be back, but I'm going on a girls' trip next week.
Good for you.
Yeah, there's 3 of us. We're all military spouses together in Okinawa, and we're going on a girls' trip where we do it every 2 years. And so saving up for that cruise has been fun. it's been easy not to go to Target because I'm going on that cruise. And so when you have a goal that you're working towards, it's easier to say no to those other choices that might be tempting, because Target is tempting, but I just don't go inside Target. When I know I'm not kidding, I just don't go. I don't go in.
Pickup only.
Yeah.
Yeah, Colleen, I love that idea of, there's two things there. One is when, and a lot of military spouses don't realize that they can open their own Roth IRA account in their name if they're married filing jointly, and they can use their spouse's income to qualify to contribute. And I think there's something powerful about having an account, a retirement account with your name on it. And I think that's a great thing to have buy-in and to have ownership of the financial situation, is when you're like, hey, look, we contributed 5% to your TSP last year and we maxed out your Roth IRA. I think our goal for next year is we're going to do both of those things, plus we're going to max out my Roth IRA. And I think that's an excellent financial goal. And it's just like one more kind of benchmark or hurdle you can set, a goal that you can set as a couple and then work together towards. And there's nothing more powerful, right, than working together with somebody else to achieve a goal. That's why great companies succeed. That's why great organizations, great militaries and great marriages, right, is setting goals and then achieving them and working together to achieve them. Colleen, what are you most excited about in the realm of personal finance for military spouses, military families? Are there any changes coming up this year or future developments that you're looking forward to?
I'm excited that more and more companies are understanding the value of military spouses when it comes to remote work. There's more opportunities now because of COVID. People have seen that not every profession, but for many professions, their employees can work remotely. So more military spouses have the opportunity to take that job with them from base to base. And with that, it's going to open up the door to the dependent care credit that the DoD is opening. So if both spouses are working, the DoD is going to allow you to move, I don't know, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but you can put money aside pre-tax from the active duty military member's paycheck to put towards childcare expenses. So this is something my husband and I are looking at doing for summer camps this summer. It's one of these accounts that whatever you put aside, you got to use it or you're going to lose it. But it's still one way to reduce your taxable income moving forward.
Yeah, I think in 2024, it's $5,000 per year. If you're married, filing jointly, then you can make contributions out of the federal employees' pay.
It's a step in the right direction.
That's awesome, Colleen. Colleen, thanks so much for coming on the show. Another great episode. Second appearance on the Military Money Manual podcast.
You might be our first repeat guest too.
Am I?
Maybe not. You're definitely one of the first couple, if not the very first, but quite the honor, I think.
I'm still honored. I wore your t-shirt. You guys gave me a t-shirt at FinCon. And I'm a proud Detroit Lions fan growing up in Michigan. And so this was a fun football season for me. So I wore it was close to Honolulu Glue. So I'd wear it underneath my Lions gray sweatshirt.
Nice.
Love that. Colleen, where can people find you on the socials or the internet?
Yeah, so I saw the website, www.selcocoaching.com. I'm sure you're going to link that in the show notes. You can find me on LinkedIn at Selco Coaching and on Instagram.
Awesome. Yep. That's SALCHOW, Selco Coaching. And Colleen, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us. And we'll catch the rest of you guys on the next episode of the Military Money Manual podcast.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Military Money Manual podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
The views and opinions presented here are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views of the DoD or its components. Reference to any commercial products or services does not constitute DoD endorsement of those products or services.